Hello friends, and welcome back to Shelley Skylines BrizVegas. Today, we're taking a look back at a time before these cars dominated the streets and surrounds. A time when trams reigned supreme, and were the catalyst for establishing the valley as the thriving hub of luxurious shopping and retail in Brisbane. I also managed to find a map of all the old tram routes across all of BrizVegas, so we're going to take a look at all of the tram lines put down around the place so far, and rework them to make sure they're a little bit more accurate, as much as we can. And as usual, we're going to have a look at some of the history of what we're going to build. And we've talked about the trams a fair bit, but they are quite a big chapter in the history of the development of Brisbane. The first trams were drawn by horses around the 1860s to 1880s in various forms. But the cost of caring for the horses and people's general preference for walking meant it wasn't as successful as first intended. So the decision was made to establish the first electric tram network, and it was up and running in 1897, with the first trams beetling down Stanley Street around Woolloongabba and through to the city past what is now the Treasury Casino. There were a wide variety in the types of trams in operation over the next few years, and a newspaper article from 1933 noted that the first electric trams were said to sway like galloping camels, while combination cars, also known as matchboxes, had glass doors which opened sympathetically and jammed diabolically. Some of the other citizen feedback I found in the Brisbane Courier commented on the dust nuisance that was caused by the unsealed roads, often kicking up a lot of dust. On arrival in the city, my clothes were in a state that would simply have disgraced a street scavenger. Goodness me. Trams became more of a necessity during World War II due to petrol rationing happening at the time. During this period, there was also quite the shortage of drivers and workers, with all the men being deployed overseas during the war. So the call out was made to the women in the community to help out, as it was across many industries. And then of course the trams played a central part in the peace celebrations after the war concluded. Over the years, the tram network continued to expand, and by the end of it, you can see this tram network was pretty dang extensive, going all the way out to the west in Toowong and south to Mount Gravatt, and as far north as Chermside. And one of the busiest tram stops was definitely the Valley, with some of the biggest shops in town like Overall's, McWhirter's, and TC Burns, rivaling the CBD and providing discerning shoppers with the finest hats, dresses, shoes, and home goods. And a quick note about these guys in particular. Their department stores were absolutely stunning as well and still exist in the area. The McWhirter's building has to be the most iconic building in the Valley, a very prominent Art Deco style architecture. And it's the first thing you see when you come down Wickham Street and head up to the Brunswick Street Mall. The other buildings for Overalls and TC Burn are still here too, though less recognisable as they have become surrounded by some modern amenities. Though the bones are still here today, but none of them operate retail like they used to. Mostly full of cheap shops or otherwise closed down and unused, and in some cases completely vandalised, as per this photo I found from just 8 months ago on Reddit. Although they did transform most of McWhirter's into apartments, which are still in use today, they are a far cry now from their glory days in the early to mid 1900s. And speaking of apartments, a little personal history here. While I've been researching the Valley, I was completely surprised to learn that TC Byrne was actually the person who built this block of flats I used to live in back when I was just 19. And funnily enough, it was created specifically for girls who were living out in the country, so they had a place to come and live in the city while they were working in his department store. In my case, as soon as I got that job at Web Central, I just couldn't wait to move to the Valley, so that is what I did. So these flats were known as the Bololo Flats, also in an Art Deco style and now a heritage listed building. So cool I got to be a part of some of this history and I didn't even know it. The lack of popularity though for the shopping in the Valley started around the 60s, with the emergence of suburban shopping malls like Chermside opening in 1959. Car ownership was dramatically increasing as well, and people seemed to prefer to use their cars and stay a bit more local. The trams themselves would soon follow, although I did find that some of the city and valley businesses actually rallied together to try and fund some of the trams for the busy Christmas period. Ultimately, it was futile and the buses took over, and the entire tram network came to a close, with one last ride on the 13th of April, 1969. What fun! Who knew I'd become so fascinated by tram history? So let's bring these old trams back to life here. I might start with the tram depots. There were a few of these around town, and one of them was right here in the Valley on Light Street. I don't actually have this in yet, so a good chance now to expand some of this eastern side of the road network in the Valley. And while we do this, I just wanted to acknowledge the sheer amount of information I was able to find to put together that little recap. So many dedicated people, most of them who actually worked on the trams or descendants of those who did. Lots of love and care put into the curation of old 8mm films, stories, personal artifacts and photos and such. For someone who was born a few decades after the trams were in existence, it was super interesting being able to do this little deep dive and get a real sense of what life was like with these little guys beetling around the streets. So let's get these streets in here so we can put down this depot. Okay, so this is Light Street just here. Let's actually check I can even fit a tram depot here first. And no, it doesn't look like it. I might just have to make some executive town planner decisions here and get rid of some of these littler streets up the top so we can put it on Light Street. Okay, that will do. So now let's rename these little streets while we're here. So the other tram depot was on Countess Street, which we created when we built Petrie Terrace. So we'll put that there next to Roma Street Station, right after I fix these damn changing street names. Some of the other depots were in Paddington and on the south side, which we don't have really anywhere to put yet, so we'll do those later. And we'll just get rid of these other ones that we were using temporarily. The other thing I've done is completely remove every tram stop that I had before. So let's bring up this map here and see if we can figure out where all the stops were in the places we've built so far. So I think I'm going to start in the West End side of town. And man, it's always screwing up my street names. So this is supposed to be Vulture Street, and we'll bung that in there. And then move along towards Wollongabba, and I'm pretty sure this is actually where the first ever stop for the electric trams was. Okay, now the Valley and Spring Hill. The tram stop, as far as I could see, was technically where the Brunswick Street Mall is today, when it was actually a road and not a pedestrian mall. So I think I'll put that over on Warner Street, which I think makes sense anyway, as this is where a lot of the buses stop these days. The other tram stops are over in the west, along Milton Road and towards Toowong. So we'll have to wait to put those in until we build out that side of town. Now, what I couldn't find is the actual order of the stops and exactly where these routes went. But I do have a list of all the tramline names, so we might just have to come up with our own routes loosely based on these. So we have the Spring Hill and Gardens lines, which I think I might just combine because they seem to go from the Botanical Gardens up to St. Paul's Terrace via Edward Street. And then we have the South Brisbane to St. Paul's Terrace line. That should be easy enough. Actually, I think we need one more stop up the north of the city here, probably around Queen Street near Victoria Bridge. So I'll put that in for this route. And then we have New Farm to West End. We don't have the roads going that far into New Farm yet, but we can certainly use this to get some trams from West End over to the Valley to start with. Alrighty, another revamp to our tram lines. I swear I spend half my time in BrizVegas just messing with these damn trams. Now we have lines coming into the valley from all parts of town, we can look at putting in some of these shops. Now you already knew there was no way I'm going to be able to put in anything that looks remotely like McWhirters in here. I did try messing around with combining a few different buildings using Anarchy mode to see if I could customize something, but nothing really has that same flair. So what I'm thinking is until we can get some custom assets for this game, I'll use the old factory condos. While they don't have that same grand and recognizable facade, they definitely look a lot like the back of McWhirter's here where all the apartments are today. So I think that makes sense. Then we have the Overalls building, which is just across the road on the corner here, next to where the Valley train station is. I might just use some kind of signature building for it, but it will look nothing like it does today. Ludo Square will do. And I guess we'll look for something that looks like the Valley Metro while we're here. This is where you can get into the actual Valley train station, which is technically underground. And in the absence of being able to do an underground station, I contemplated using subways, but it definitely needs to be a train. So I have actually started to mess around with trying to do some custom train stations, so that I could try and hide it behind a building here, but at least the stop would be in the right part of town. But without using such huge train station assets. But we'll save that for a train episode coming up soon. Now TC Burn is more nestled in here next to where the Chinatown Mall is. Kind of unrecognizable really, buried amongst everything here. And you know, these buildings that are already here kind of look pretty fine, so I might leave that as is. Now when it comes to my apartment, let's jump over to McLaughlin Street. I guess the old factory condos could do here as well with that whole brick aesthetic. But you know what? I'm the mayor, and this is my apartment, so I'm going to use my favorite of the signature buildings and put in the Rubik Apartments, because I think this is where I would want to live. Looks good. Let's decorate this a little bit. This picture is actually a good view of this little spot here. There was this fire station over the back here and some parking behind the building with some fences and stuff like that. And some of these other buildings around the corner as well. Some car parks behind here, and I might add in some of the other random buildings across the street as well. Okay, this is actually feeling pretty realistic with the park across over there. And my window was actually on this side, so I would be able to look down and see this little side street and the park next to it. Actually, this brings up a few memories. My car got broken into here once while it was parked on this street, as well as receiving several parking tickets, because technically you can't park here for more than 2 hours, but I did anyway because I was young and stupid. And then there was also the time I woke up at 3 a.m. to some noises outside, only to look out my window here and find 2 people who must have had a big night clubbing and walking back somewhere and decided to fornicate on the hood of my car while they were passing through. Might have to save that story for a Shelley Skylines After Dark. Ah, memories. Now let's fill out some of the spaces a little bit more with some regular zoning. And I'll be leaving some of these other spots free for our next episode, which will be the final part 3 to our little close-up on Fortitude Valley. And so I was thinking I've been doing pretty well for the most part, in terms of finding buildings that look similar enough to real life. But this episode has really made me want to get into building some custom assets when we have the ability to. There's just so many unique building styles around this area that I think I'm going to have to learn how to use Blender, a fun challenge. Imagine an asset pack of Queenslander houses, the McWhirter's building, a proper Web Central building, and also things like the Treasury Casino. The possibilities are endless. Now you know we have to cap off this episode with a little trambience in real time. This is a great time to hit the subscribe button and even throw me a like. Don't make me show you that graph of people watching subscribed versus unsubscribed now, because it's not pretty. So go on and consider it your good deed for the day. But for now, let's ride off into the sunset. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, thanks, bye.